Good evening, everyone. Good afternoon or good morning, because I want to show love to everyone, regardless of what time you're joining us. It is your girl, Marcie Thomas, and I am so happy to be here with you again for another episode of Live Well Sister. So please come on in the room, and as you're joining us, let us know where you're joining us from. If you're new here or if you've been here many times, we just really want this to be a collective experience. So by knowing who's here, that allows us to give you some shout outs and all of that sort of good thing. So welcome and thank you so much for being here. Now, if you haven't joined us before, Live Well Sister is a space where we have wonderful and powerful conversations about all sorts of things, some of which you may have seen in that introduction, but just things in general that help us to live well. And how many of you all know that based upon what's happening in the world around us right now, we need to, hone in on those sorts of tools and things to help us understand how to navigate the world and take the best care of ourselves. So tonight I am super, super, super excited to have a young lady come into the room who I have to tell you, I'm going to talk about her mama for a second before I bring her on. But back in December, I was at an event, and a book event, and I met her mom, and she's like, my daughter has a book coming out. My daughter has a book coming out. You need to talk to her. And I was like, wait a minute, I'm already aware of your daughter. So thank you for bringing it to my attention. I'm going to make sure that it happens. And that beautiful young lady is Jasmine Marie. Now, she is a speaker, breathwork practitioner, and the CEO and founder of Black Girls Breathing. Driven by a commitment to improve health outcomes for underserved communities and Black women, specifically, her innovative vision and execution to provide accessible wellness and somatic health tools to heal trauma and decrease chronic stress, has impacted tens of thousands of Black women to date, with a mission to impact over 1 million women in her work. How exciting is that? So Marie is a graduate of NYU Stern School of Business and is a serial entrepreneur with a corporate professional background in global brand management. And she is a proud native of Atlanta, which is also my current home. Not a native, but my current home. So without any further delay, let's welcome Jasmine Marie to the Live Well Sister Show, and we will be talking about her great book, Black Girls Breathing.
My background's a little blurred. Hi,
yes,
thank you so much for having me.
Yes, I am so excited to have you here. As I mentioned, gave your mama that shout out because she was like, my baby wrote a book. You need to talk to her. And I love that. So, and let's see here. We got some folks in the room. Peace and blessings. Welcome from Philly. Philly. Yes, and then we've got Quatrice Triplet. Glad to be here tonight. Hey, that's my soror. And then Wanda Clark from Fayetteville, Georgia.
So that's Mama right there.
Hey, Mama. Hey, Mama. Well, I hope you heard your shout out, Mama, and thank you again for making sure that I knew about your baby girl and her book, and for producing such a beautiful young lady. So thanks, Mama. Thanks, Wanda. So let's start to get into it. Okay, we've got Tracy. Yes, happy to be here. Yes. So everyone, thank you so much for being here, Jasmine. So first of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
It came out last month, and it was a real labor of love, but it was also labor. So congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah. So I know that you've been doing this work for a while, and so. First question, how is it that you decided to get into breath work?
Yeah, so I found the tool working in New York City, stressed out, recent grad. And it was just, and I talk about this in the book, it was just the culture that you grind to make it. There aren't complaints if you want to succeed. That's just the nature of life after school. And so I was constantly going to the doctor with physical sensations of my stress. And they would just be like, this is stress. Like, don't know what else to tell you. Right. And so though I was doing traditional talk therapy at the time, I knew I needed to try something else and didn't know that until I happened upon breath work. So I was volunteering in the marketing department at the church that I was a part of in Harlem, and they just opened a community center that served all of Harlem, not just the church.
Mm-hmm.
And the pastor's personal breath worker was there, and she started
Okay.
doing classes. And so I did my first class, and the the experience I had, I describe it as my problems didn't go away, right? In fact,
Mhm.
they worsened around that time. Work got even crazier. The relationship that I was in at the time got even more toxic. But the tool allowed me to have space around my thoughts, and things didn't feel so closed in. And I could tap into the tool at any time. And I was just navigating these difficult situations a lot better. And just how allowed them to impact me mentally. And
Mhm.
just being able to create that distance gave me a new way to show up for myself, implementing more boundaries, knowing my limits, understanding my body's cues around stress.
Mhm.
Because the
Mhm.
biggest thing I found with this work is most times, a lot of Black women, when they come to me, they're at a place where they don't know how they feel. You can ask, like,
Right.
how do you feel? Right? They couldn't tell
Mhm.
you what's wrong. There's this sense of burnout, there's this dark cloud energy, and can't tell you where it started or began. And that's a symptom of chronic stress, where it's just been so persistent that it's become your norm. And so when you're able to learn your body and have a tool
Mhm.
where you can listen to your body's cues and then do something, because some of us are working through aches and pains in our body and
That's
normalizing it
true.
and not going to the doctor, right? Like these little things we've been conditioned to do that end up having such an impact on us over time. I feel my goal with this tool was not just that people learn breath work, but so they can
Mhm.
learn themselves more. And that's a tool you can take into any area of your life. You can walk into a relationship and not feel right, something feel off, and listen to that. You can
Right.
go into a work environment and say, okay, I know what a stressful, meeting in a day feels like, but it's been stressful months. I need to listen to that. How do I move
Right.
accordingly? So that's the knowledge that I wish this tool provides all of us,
Mhm.
strengthening that inner wisdom and allowing ourselves to advocate for our own selves more.
Yes, yes. And these are all themes that you talk about throughout the book. And this is
Yeah.
quite a beautiful and powerful book. And I was teasing Jasmine. I was like, oh, I realized I'm like opposite side. I'm looking like the cover with the hairstyle and everything. But, and that is, well, you said several things in that answer. One that I wanted to just kind of tap into real quick, because you said that
Mm-hmm.
this was at a church that you were going.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And just the
Yeah.
fact that you had a church
Mm-hmm.
that was giving people other tools, because a lot of times
Yes.
it'll be like, okay, you pray, the things, or you fast, or these things that we typically do in, a Christian church. But the fact that
Yeah.
your pastor was like, hey, we need to learn how to breathe. I think
Yeah.
it's powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And meditation is biblical. Jesus would go off solo in the mountains, be like, nobody bother me. I need this
Right.
solitude to further connect with myself, right? So we have those examples in the Bible. I think sometimes, it can be a hindrance. Sometimes people think, oh, breath work, I don't know if this is for me in my faith. And I'm always like, Jesus would want you to breathe.
Right.
And let everything that has breath, right? Praise the Lord. Well, you're not even taking those breaths, girl. So we need to make sure you're sticking around here.
Right.
So, and I believe God wants us to be whole human beings and to be able to find those moments of stillness, because even those who are practicing religions that require a lot of stillness and prayer life, well, if you can't silence the mind and find those moments without your day, how are you able to tap in and to practice your faith? So this is
Mhm.
a tool that, regardless of religion,
Right.
you can tap into, and then you can even look to your specific faith, Christianity, and see examples of a tool like this and stillness being so important part of practicing your faith.
And stillness is just hard for so many of us, because just the mere fact of sitting, and you talk about doing nothing. And
Mm-hmm.
ironically, my mother has a chair in her house that she calls her do nothing chair. Oh, I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
sit in my do nothing
I
chair.
love that. That's
But
so genius.
yes, yes. But how many of us really understand what it means to just sit still and, and do nothing and all of
Mhm.
that. So,
And I would like to add too that we shouldn't beat ourselves up for our inability to be still because we've been conditioned to be that way.
hmm.
I don't believe that we, have evolved enough as human beings, our nervous systems, to be able to receive all the world's trauma at a ding of our fingertips on our phones. Our bodies aren't really, you know, made to handle that amount of secondhand trauma and stress. So when we think about what we're having to navigate in the world today, of course, it's going to be hard for you to figure out how to use still your mind. And it's a practice. It's never, like I still have moments where my mind is going and I have to
Right.
remind myself, okay, I have to implement those tools, but it's a continuous practice. It's not something we should feel like we have to reach this end goal and if it's all or nothing. But it's a continuous practice and giving ourselves that grace that we're really navigating through some interesting times. And
Mm-hmm.
speaking to that do nothing chair, what I love about that, it's connecting that mind and body with some physical representation. So dedicating a place where your brain can recognize, oh, this is the place that I relax. It's also why I recommend, not doing work in your bed, having
Right.
clear distinctions of where you do work, where you rest. So your body can tap into those natural cues and helping your brain learn that association as well. That it's
Mm-hmm.
very subconscious work, but it works. So having that chair where it's like, this is the chair, I know I'm going to relax. I can see it and immediately feel calm and my body feels relaxed is so helpful
Mm-hmm.
for practicing stillness.
Yes, yes. And when I was reading that part of the book, I was like, "Oh, mom!" I didn't even tell my mom that she usually watches. So yes, I'm talking about your do nothing chair. But this book, the other thing that I love about this book, now everybody, well, this isn't the type of book that there would be spoilers per se, but of course we have a limited amount of time, so we are not going to tell you everything that's in the book. So I'm gonna just let you know that up front. But there are really 10 great chapters that dive into a lot of concepts that really can help us learn how to deal with our chronic stress and heal
Mm,
from trauma and all these sorts of things. It really is a healing resource, and I like the fact that how it's positioned. I mean, yes, there are tips and tools, but really
mm,
it's a lot of things for us to really meditate on and think
mhm,
about and and
mhm,
and deal with our personal experiences. But one of the
mhm,
things that you do throughout the book, Jasmine, it is filled with your stories and your experiences.
mhm. Yeah.
So how did that feel, being so, what should I say, vulnerable and
Yeah.
transparent and helping others by telling your own stories?
Yeah, well, I guess a bit of testimony. While I was in the crux of writing the book, I was dealing with my own health challenges from chronic stress. And it just goes to show you how sneaky chronic stress is because you can be, operating within your, care plan and how you take care of yourselves. But when work accelerates to a point or life is accelerating to a point where it's newfound territory and you're not finding yourself adjusting that care plan, you can end up in a situation where you are chronically stressed and burnt out and you're like, I have no idea how I got here.
Right.
That's why it's a continuous learning. Like I just want everyone to not feel shamed about that. The girl who wrote a book about addressing chronic stress ended up having to
Mhm.
deal with chronic stress while writing the book.
Right.
Um, and so I have a rule for myself, even in this work, even though I'm very vulnerable with our community and share a lot, I don't talk about anything that I haven't processed myself. So
Mm.
anything that you're reading in the book is something that I've processed and feel comfortable sharing. There aren't specifics. I don't talk about the kind of autoimmune condition I was
Right.
navigating. Like those things are mine and
Right.
can stay within my close community or my close circle. But anything that I shared, I've processed to the point where I feel like not only can I talk about it, but I've learned and can offer some insight and tools to how I got through it and what I
Mm.
learned and can then pass on to my community.
Yes, and I love that because it makes it more real because we're hearing from you and it's not like you're just telling us, you're also showing
Mm,
us. I can
mhm,
appreciate that.
mhm,
But in the very first chapter of the book, you spend
mm,
a lot of time talking just about what chronic stress is and
mhm.
what it is and how it shows up for Black women. So
Oh,
just talk to us a little bit about that because a lot of it centers around us being quote unquote strong Black women.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's, here's the juxtaposition. Even though we know this thing that this archetype that existed for generations and generations, it's developed from survival. We had to be those things, right? We had to show up that way. We had to care for other people before we cared for ourselves. And I
Mhm.
mentioned in the book, we're just now, I mean, we can even argue that we don't fully own our bodies. We can argue that, right? But we are just now gaining ownership of our bodies. And that's a very unique history that other demographics cannot relate to, right? When it comes to autonomy and, you know, healing your body and being in connection with your body, we're just now beginning to own our bodies. So, talk about that learning and having to shift from having a role where we're over prioritizing other people to where we
Right.
decide to think, well, how do I feel? It's a complete process, and
Mhm.
one that can shift identities to the point where it feels so uncomfortable. It's kind of like, you know, a biblical reference, those that were in Egypt and they had to take that route to get to the promised land, right? And though
Mhm.
it was awful in Egypt, it was familiar.
Right.
And I
Right.
would much rather be in a place that maybe it feels taxing, it feels overwhelming, but it's familiar than to have to go through that identity shift to where I'm going to a new place and I'm trying to associate who I am outside of what I do and how I show up for others and how I overexert myself. It becomes an identity crisis, and it's one that
Mhm.
you have to prepare yourself for, because I think that the depiction we're given often with our healing journeys is like, those pharma commercials where you're running through the fields and I'm like, sunshine, and I'm doing the healing work, all is well now. And it's just like,
Right.
it's not, it may get, not only feel debilitating, but thinking about, there's the person and then there's the community, right? So as you
Mhm.
shift how you relate to work, friends, family, that
Mhm.
begins to shift as well. And
Right.
so, how debilitating it can feel to not only be dealing with your own juxtaposition of who am I now, but to
Mhm.
lose support that was based on who you used to be as you evolve into this new person. And
Mhm.
so all of that can feel like, did I make the right decision? Am I
Right.
being mean? Should I have done this boundary? Is what they're saying true? Like, all of that stuff can come up. And it takes time and some self compassion and a bit of confidence and self love for us to take that step by step journey to get to the place where we're like, I actually don't want to show up this way anymore.
Right.
I know it's convenient for everybody else,
Woo! That part.
but
But
it's weighing me down.
and that's something, and you mentioned those types of scenarios many times, because
Mhm,
I mean we all deal with them, and it doesn't
mhm,
matter whether you're single, married, got kids, don't have
mhm,
kids. No
mhm.
matter who you are as a Black woman, there is somebody who is leaning on you more than they
Mhm.
probably should,
Yeah.
expecting you to do more than you probably should. and
Mhm.
and because we have been, you know many times brought up that that's just what we do. We serve everybody,
Yeah.
we take care of everybody, and we put ourselves last because we've been always doing that. There is
Yeah.
oftentimes pushback when you decide to do something different, when you
Mhm,
decide to say,
mhm.
hey, that's not working for me anymore, I'm going to take a break. I'm
Yeah.
not going to run you around town, I'm not going to give
Yeah.
whatever it is you're asking for every time you ask for it. And
Mhm,
that's with children, that's with extended families, that's with partners.
mhm, mhm. Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Like I said, it can be a complete shift once we start going through each and every area of our life. And that chapter on chronic stress is our crisis goes through areas where stress may be showing up in our lives, and we may not even be aware of it. So
Mhm.
doing that kind of reflection and sitting with those truths, and sometimes the journey looks like you sit with it and you're strategic with how you make those changes, because
Mhm.
I also recognize, I'm not one. If anyone's been a part of our community, I'm not over here saying, yes, girl, do those boundaries in the workplace. I understand for Black women, there's consequences for certain things when we show up in the workplace. So if you have to be strategic, with those boundaries to ensure again, that survival component is still very much a reality for us. So, as much as I'm offering these tools, it's not within a vacuum of understanding where we are in society and the backlash that we get when we do decide to operate in a way that's not convenient for others.
Mm-hmm. And as you were saying that, I'm just thinking about now specifically 2 weeks after some things changed. Thinking about that, whatever things we may have been dealing with already, I'm thinking workplace
Mhm.
specifically, we might have been
Mhm.
dealing with it already, but now I'm sure that a lot of things are heightened for people
Mhm.
just based upon what we're dealing with. So being able to have these tools to understand how we need to care for ourselves. But as you
Mhm.
said, sometimes you gotta what should I say, pick your battles. Just
Mhm. Pick your
understanding.
battles.
Yeah,
Pick your
but still
battles.
take care of yourself. Still
Taking
to
care
take
of
care of
yourself,
yourself.
absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
One thing you talk about, you have a chapter talking about healing our bodies, and I
Mhm.
found that
Mhm.
a powerful section as well because, as you mentioned earlier, we have not always had control over our bodies or owned
Mhm.
our bodies, so to
Right.
speak. That is what happened to us just being brought here. If you are of African American descent, our
Mhm.
ancestors, we didn't own our bodies, we didn't own
Mhm.
ourselves, and there's just so many different things that we're not able to care for our bodies or have not traditionally been able to care for our bodies in the ways that maybe others have. So just
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that and how we navigate that.
Yeah. Specifically in that heal your body chapter, going through how trauma really robs us of the opportunity to live outside of that lens of trauma if we're stuck in it, right? And so we don't house trauma in our minds. So we house it in our bodies. So we may have been able to process that that thing happened to us, but still feel physical sensations, right? Your body can literally feel there. So if we think about our body literally feels there. We talk about generational trauma. There are fears we have that
Mhm.
our body remembers from being on plantations, and but we're 2025 sitting in office space,
Right.
but can get triggered back to that place, right? So very much so have embodied traumas, and working through that with a tool like the breath. And I always say the good news is, yes, the study of epigenetics, trauma getting passed down through your DNA. However, we can rewrite our DNA. That's
Mhm.
also a choice. And
Mhm.
doing so with something as simple as the breath, and we're activating our parasympathetic nervous system, which is the part of our nervous system that governs rest and digest. And so when it comes to chronically stressed and traumatized individuals, that part of our nervous system is like a muscle, isn't even activated,
Mhm.
right? So we are in fight or flight mode, high cortisol. That is our norm. That's why stress and depression looks like irritability and anger for Black women, because it's you
Mhm.
literally have no capacity, right? Your nervous system is so taxed that it's showing up in these ways. You can't take one more thing, is how it
Right.
feels for you.
Mhm.
And so addressing that with something like the breath, allowing our nervous systems to understand what it feels like in the body to feel safe and calm. That's a new sensation for a lot of us. We don't know how to get there, we don't know how that feels. So, creating a new baseline with the breath and then letting that be our norm is my goal, right? So, our norm not being we're so stressed out, that it even being that chronically stressed and traumatized, it impacts our decision making. It does.
Mhm. Mhm.
Being able to, and that's what I feel like this administration is leaning on right now. If
Right.
we can get them as
Right.
scattered and heightened and nervous and anxious as possible, then they can't organize, then they can't gather, then they can't think strategically around next steps,
Mhm.
to progress. So really using the breath to heal the body and the nervous system in particular, creating a new baseline and allowing that baseline to be what our body naturally comes back to, because that's the goal. Our
Mhm.
body already has this ability. But if you're so chronically stressed, it's like a muscle, it's weak, right? So it's not even able to get you back to a normal baseline. And I'm at the point where if I notice, my body will naturally just, I'll start breathing deeper. I'll have a
Right.
sigh. My body has these natural releases because I've been practicing this work for so much. That's my new baseline, and that's my
Right.
goal for us to heal that our nervous systems, and create a new baseline that's not based on our exertion.
Yes, that is so good because it definitely impacts us. And I mean, I've said this, with other people before. I notice a lot of time I'm shallow breathing, and so that is
Mm-hmm.
the thing for me, just to like
Mm-hmm.
be able to start taking deeper,
Yes,
and
yeah.
not you. And it's not even a conscientious thing that I'm shallow breathing.
Mm-hmm.
Every now and again, I'll notice, like, wait a minute, girl, why are you breathing like that? So,
Mm-hmm.
and the thing of it is, and you can tell us, and I probably already know the answer, but when you start working with people who come to you for your programs, which you're going to get into in a little bit later, so you got to stay tuned to learn more about Jasmine's work outside of the book. But do you find that a lot of people don't even really understand how stress is impacting them in their bodies?
Yeah, I think that there, and especially for Black women, we've mentally processed it. So there may already be a bunch of work that's been done in traditional therapy, or different mental exercises like journaling, but there's that kind of plateau as far as like, okay, but how do I address the trauma? Like, I know what I went through, I know, how do I heal it, how do I address it? You have that segment. Then you have a segment who just shows up as like, I don't know, things just in my life feel amuck, and I don't know where to
Mhm.
go from here. I feel disconnected from myself. I've been operating in autopilot. I'm not happy, and so that's their starting point. But it definitely ranges. But I'll say this, because I do corporate work as well, and I have this joke about, I'll go in to do a corporate session, and I'm walking out of there like, la la la, time for lunch, and I do a session with us, and it's just like, whew,
Yeah,
we're
because
so heavy, we hold so much, yes.
mhm.
That you definitely feel that. And it takes a toll, it does tax. But that's just shows how much that we're holding in our day-to-day lives. And then when we think about the fact of all the little infractions that we experience in a day, are
Mhm.
we then combating that with the tool daily, right, to address that?
Mhm.
So you experienced a microaggression at work, and I mentioned this example in the book, and they call it a microaggression, but it's not, because the impact is so,
Yeah.
much bigger
This
and
aggression is
lingering.
aggression.
Right. And so you have an infraction at work, right? The situation happens. The person who said the thing probably went on throughout their day, la la la, on to the next task. You from that point to the end of the day, you are replaying that situation. You didn't maybe not have even caught it in the moment, but you catch the shade or whatever the comment
Mhm.
was after you start really ruminating on what happened. Then you take it home. You're in the shower. You're rehearsing what you would have said back, right? Like, I can't believe that. And then you're talking to somebody else about the situation, right? And then the next day you have to interact with this person again, and now you're triggered just from seeing them, and that this thing has happened and you haven't even been able to address it. Think about all the energy and the taxation on yourself that happened between the infraction and that next day within a 24-hour period versus the person that did it.
Mhm.
Right now, think about that taxation. Now, what tools are you using to combat against that daily? I
Right.
also don't want us to use this as an emergency, like, oh, I'm stressed out to the max. Now I'm going to do some breath work. No, how would you feel if you use this every day? If you
Mhm.
created a practice to 30 seconds a minute. And there's an exercise I use here in the book when it comes to rewiring our thoughts around having time. So something I noticed myself saying a lot, and we all do it, would be like, oh, I don't have time for doing that. So I was like, stop,
Mhm.
let me record it. Anytime I'm like, oh, I don't have time to juice. Okay, let's press the timer. Oh, it took 25 minutes. Can I find 25 minutes? I can find 25 minutes, right? Just little ways that we help our mind stop putting up the objections when it comes to taking care of ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
and finding the time. Because you probably scrolled for 25 minutes on your phone today. You probably
Right.
sat and watched the news for an hour. You have time. Find the time and redirect that time back to yourself. We're going to need it now more than ever.
Absolutely. We have a comment. This was mentioned above a few months ago. I
Mhm.
still have feelings about it. Yeah. The body and mind doesn't forget. Oh, yeah. Because,
Mhm.
as I was reading your book and some of the stuff you were talking about, things came back that might have happened 3, 4, 5 years ago. And I'm like,
Mhm.
yeah, I'm still pissed off.
Mhm.
I still wish I could, respond or react or tell this person how I really felt or whatever, because those things, yeah, the body doesn't forget. The mind,
No.
you might put it, way in the back burner somewhere,
Mhm.
but you don't really forget.
And
So
that's when we can use tools like righteous anger too, right? So I don't want us to feel like this is something that's been proven is around women being diagnosed with autoimmune disorders more than any other demographic, Black women specifically, because of repressed emotions. So
mm,
that anger is righteous, and it's not, it's how do we deal with that anger? So there's some exercises I use in the book. We do a lot of yelling in the breathwork sessions I've done and facilitated. Yes, I mean, yelling, get it out of your body. When kids have anger or frustration, they throw a tantrum. It's so natural, right? Tap back
mhm,
into these intuitive tools to help your body deal with that, so you're not carrying that on your shoulders, in your gut, and that's not turning into disease later on, right? It's really
right,
important that we work with those emotions, process those emotions, see it and witness ourselves in those emotions. And we don't have to act on those emotions, but it's important that we process them.
right. I just want to share this second comment, and then I had a comment about the yelling. Sherilyn is saying, and watching my coworkers skip along didn't help. Yeah, they do some crazy stuff. And go on, like you were saying, Jasmine,
All
they
about
do
their
it,
day.
and they go on about their business, and you're all upset and can't
Mhm,
sleep and mad about it, and all these having nightmares, all these sorts of things. But the
mhm,
thing about the yelling, I have some sorors in the room. We need to get with
mhm.
you and come see you here in Atlanta, so we
Yeah,
can have some mamas just screaming out, yelling out. Because
yeah,
when you said it, I thought about it. Yeah, I don't think I've done that in a long time,
yeah.
and it's not
Grab
even.
a pillow
Yeah,
tonight.
yeah, it's not
Grab a
just late
pillow.
at night.
Yeah.
Not even that anything is necessarily wrong, but like you said,
Mhm,
it doesn't always have to be in crisis. Sometimes you just need to
mhm,
do these things because it could be something sitting there that I'm not even really thinking about on the surface
mhm.
that could be bothering me. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
that is pretty rich. So all right, so we're gonna go have a screaming session. We need to do that. But in this book, because you talk about trauma and generational healing and all
Mhm,
these sorts of things, you have a chapter called Your Mama, and Her Mama's Mama.
mhm.
So, just tell us a little bit about what you're bringing to our attention in that particular chapter, because I
Yeah.
thought it was pretty good.
Yeah, I begin that chapter n- talking about my grandmother who is still living, growing up in Money, Mississippi, the same town that Emmett Till was killed in, right? And
Mhm.
so she was a sharecropper. She needed to pick 150 pounds of cotton a day or else, right? Like that was her world and the fear around that. Now, has she ever processed that? Absolutely not.
Mhm.
What tools and space did she have at the time? It was all focused on survival and her deciding to leave and go to Chicago. And she met my grandfather and was able to build a beautiful life. But that trauma that just gets passed down, again, the study of epigenetics, trauma gets passed down in our DNA, and what that means when it's not addressed over generations. It can develop into disease, and I feel that that's the reason why our community leads in a lot of diseases is the traumas that we've experienced. Now, have they done a lot of research and invested like they should into that? Absolutely not, because I think that will come with conversations around reparations and think,
Mhm.
how is there retribution for the trauma caused by this country. But in that chapter, really going through. not only the trauma we experience and how that shows up over time, but how do we heal it and address it? A
Mm-hmm.
lot of that goes back to having some compassion for your ancestors, for
Right.
those in your lineage, excuse me, for the tools that they had at the time. We are just now, a lot of us are learning self care. A lot of us
Right.
are learning all this stuff right
Yes.
now. And so giving compassion to your mom, your grandmother, for, okay, I didn't learn this from them, or maybe they passed down something that I want to address and want to stop in my generation. But
Mm-hmm.
look at all they had to go through, and there is a sense, and then giving them credit where credit is due, because
Right.
there were certain tools that they used to make sure that they got us here. They
Right.
survived.
Yes, they survived. They
Yeah.
definitely survived. Oh,
Thank
I
you,
like it.
Donna.
Yes, I think there should be a normed definition between self-care and self-love. How do we prioritize our mental health, self-love, navigating
Mhm.
this world is important. Mm.
Mm. We talk a lot in our community about how these concepts can feel really big. So it's like, you need self love. And then it can feel like, do I have self love? What does that entail,
Mhm.
right? Like, what is that concept? How
What
do we
is
life it out? What
that?
is practical, right? And I
Mhm.
say developing a sense of self love, it can be as simple as a daily commitment to self, showing up to self for self, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
any promise you make to yourself, I'm going to take this walk every day to pour into myself. You're
Mm.
showing yourself, hey, I trust that you say what you say you're going to do for me, you're going to do for me.
Mm.
You're showing yourself that I love this body enough to take care of it, even when it's inconvenient, and to prioritize it.
Right.
Those small daily actions. And there's even some exercises in the book, like mirror work, which is one of my favorites for those of us who are healing from, just our relationship with our bodies. It could be experiencing, a type of trauma, a specific type of trauma, with our bodies, and learning how to embrace what we see in the mirror, while also making space for, okay, if I don't like this, what's going to be my plan? How can I hold myself lovingly,
Right.
to create a plan to fix this thing so I can love what I see in the mirror and pour
Mhm.
more love. And so that mirror work exercise is literally just naming things, looking at yourself in the mirror. Like
Mm.
that is a practice. I remember I had developed an awful habit growing up of not looking at myself, because I was
Mhm.
in dance and I was the only black girl, one of the only black girls there, and the way my body would build. So I'm in like
Mm.
traditional company, point, dance, ballet, and my body was never that,
Mm.
ballerina shape. I would build. I was a thicker girl, right? My
Right.
legs would build into this muscle. And I hated looking at myself in the mirror. You know how hard it is to
Mm.
dance and not look at yourself in the mirror?
True.
It's so hard, but it's something that I had adapted because I was just developing, sort of a hate for being different, being in this kind of environment. So, really getting to an exercise where you can look at yourself in the mirror and love what you see. And just by your embracing it, you'll find that, oh, you don't mind being seen by others now. You'll go out more, you'll feel
Right.
more comfortable in your skin being by yourself, or doing things by yourself, or exploring. That's a sense of self love. That's a type of practice that we can, incorporate day to day. In the shower, when you take a shower, every body part that you scrub, thank you, arms, for getting me through this day. Thank you, legs, for allowing me to take one step in front of the other, right?
Mhm.
These are ways to pour love into your body. There's so many studies that have been shown. And then you can go back to the book. I reference the Bible many times in the book because that's my background. But life and death is in the power of the tongue.
Yes.
What can you speak over yourself? If you're constantly speaking negativity, I hate this, I hate that, I don't like this, I don't like that, that's gonna sink into your cells.
Mhm.
That negative self-talk, when you can slow, and it can be slow. I'm not saying by tomorrow I'm the best, even
Yeah,
if you don't
I
feel
know
it,
I'm
right?
all that.
Right? But hey, maybe even do a little bit of that even when you don't feel like it, and notice the
Right.
progression over time. Like, I
Mhm.
really do love myself. It's
Mhm.
these little practices. And again, if we weren't taught it, if it wasn't shown to us and mirrored to us growing up, it's complete learning for us. And we even think about, and I mentioned this in the book, but how we kept black girls safe on the
Right.
plantation. she ain't nothing. She ain't, because Massa wanted little girl.
Right.
So mama would say disparaging comments to protect her,
Mm-hmm.
right? And just think about some of those sayings getting passed down a day. She thinks she all that. She's fast. She's this. These kind of things that have generation to generation.
Mm-hmm.
How can we revert that? And ensure that we're having a self-love practice that's living and not this thing that feels like, oh, do I love myself? You
Mm-hmm.
can see yourself loving yourself in the day-to-day when you have a practice.
Mm-hmm. I love that. That was good right there, and
Mm,
it really tells us what's in that particular chapter. But I'm just
mm,
thinking that, as you said, giving grace to those
mm,
who made. I mean, they could only do what they were
mm,
able to do. So all these
mm.
like gentle parenting, all these different things that are like in the now, our parents didn't have all of that. And I mean, it's
Yeah.
not to say, I mean, we know that some parents were just terrible parents. I mean, it is what it is. But
Mhm,
in other cases, it's just like they only could do what they knew. And now
mhm,
that we are learning and we are healing, it's something that we can take into future generations and even sometimes help with, like you say, you have a grandmother and a mother who's as
mhm,
you become the woman that you're becoming and
mhm,
learning, these are tools you can share with them as well. So,
mhm. Yeah.
a question about breath work specifically: have you experienced long-term changes in your peace of mind through breath work?
Yeah, I would say yes. Yes, and it's a continuous practice in this world.
Mm-hmm.
It is a continuous, it's okay. So there's the work of getting your peace, and then there's the work of maintaining your peace.
That
And I
part.
think we're always tasked with doing what we need to do to maintain our peace in this world. Because I said that the world didn't give it and the world can't take it away, but they're going to try. They're going to try. They're going to try. So that means 10 minutes of being a informed citizen scrolling through the news. That's it. Go do something good for yourself
Right.
and do what you can. Your inch by inch. And your inch by inch may not look like having a social justice organization. Your inch by inch could be making sure that everyone in your home feels loved and seen. That's
Mm-hmm.
revolutionary work for
It
us, for our
is.
community.
It is. It
Sometimes we
is.
think that, these big dreams, and I'm very careful too, just because I've had a journey, just because I've, had great opportunities and been on large platforms, that doesn't necessarily need to be your dream. Your dream is just as important. Your work is just as important. We don't want to compare in terms of, size. What
Mm-hmm.
you're supposed to do in this earth, even if you, and then if you're stay-at-home mom, your job is to ensure that everyone who walks through that door feels loved,
Right.
that you also model taking care of yourself to your children so they know, oh, mom's doing for us, but she's also caring for herself.
Mm-hmm.
If that means you're in a corporation and you are tasked to climb that ladder, okay, what can you do in that role to ensure that you're bettering the community in some way? That's maybe helping, ensure that even with this DEI rollback, there's diverse candidates that's going through that pipeline, right? We all have a
Mm-hmm.
role to play. And if we can hone in on that and tune out the noise, that's how we're going to get through this time.
Mm-hmm.
We've been through these times before, especially as a
Right.
people, but has not been without an extreme focus. And so if they can take away our focus and our sense of unity, that's where
Mm-hmm.
they'll win. If we can maintain our focus, maintain our sense of calm, use our breath, do not allow this weapon of distraction to manifest in our day-to-day lives, that's how we will get through this time. And so our peace is to be protected, even as we work to sustain it on a day to day. There's also work for us to protect our peace. So it's twofold. And I do find that the breath helps get me there, but I also incorporate other things. I'm walking every single day.
Mm-hmm.
I'm walking every day. And sometimes I don't have any music on. It's just the noise of the birds, just like and it's just a representation of me that there's life.
Right.
There's a whole world out here. Things are
Mm-hmm.
still moving. Nature is okay, right? It really is me listening to my body and honoring what it needs in the day because some days look different. So, yeah.
Yes. Yes, that's good. That is so good. And you mentioned us coming together, and this space, I mean, the show is Live Well Sister,
Mhm.
but the space is Brown Girl Collective. So
Mhm.
let's talk a bit about our Brown Girl Collective. And,
Mhm.
we got some allies that watch as well, but
Mhm.
specifically the Brown Girl Collective. Healing Our Sisterhood is a chapter in this book. And I'm like, woo,
Mhm.
woo,
Yeah.
child.
Oh, yeah. I know. I know. That was one where I had, my editor at the publisher is a Black woman who
Okay.
leads this imprint. That's also, when I tell you all, this book was so intentional. Like, Black hands touched this. Black women advocated for this work in each and every step. Like that, if you know me, you know that's so important to me. But I remember writing this chapter, and there were times where I'm like, okay, this may be triggering, but it has to be said. I think
Mm-hmm.
sometimes when we're out in the world and we're navigating, how we're perceived in our trauma, we don't like to talk about certain things. We like to keep things with, like, don't talk about our dysfunction out in the world because how they already think of us, or don't talk about this out in the world because we don't need them looking at us with more stereotypes. But I was just like, this is a really call coming in from inside the house on, there's trauma that we've experienced amongst other Black women that we have to work through. And if we really want to see communities strengthen, and I
Mm-hmm.
want us to have the tools to have the nuanced conversations and to be able to truly heal versus there being a right or wrong. That chapter really, we had a situation one time in a breathwork circle couple of years ago where we were talking about colorism, and the stories that were coming up, right? Understanding the definition of colorism is around dark skinned people being discriminated against, right? That is the definition of colorism. But there were some conversations bubbling up around women who were brown skin or light skin who were like, I experienced this, I was made fun of because I was light bright, and it had me looking at Black women differently. I still want us to heal that. I don't want us to have this, like, we're racing for which trauma, trying to compare the
Right.
traumas. I want us to heal. Let's
Right.
talk about this, right? And it was just like understanding, though, right now, sometimes we're not encouraged to have those nuanced conversations. It becomes very social media, this way or that way.
Right.
And it's just like, get off your phones, get in community, and really start to deep dive on your beliefs that you have towards each other that have been internalized from society, that we have adapted in order to succeed and excel in these workplaces, right? How many of us have stories of that Black woman who's rolled, gone to the tops of her ranks, but now looks at other Black women who are climbing as a threat because she's only seen examples of few of us being able to be there and
Right.
thrive, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or the Black woman that gets to the top ranks and her peers are not showing up, professionally, and it's sister girl, and it's just like, hey, I've worked so hard for this, I still desire respect in this role, right? Like, we can go on
Mm-hmm.
the different scenarios, but really addressing the trauma we've experienced amongst each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to make it as a gentle call coming from
Yes.
inside the house as possible, but as something that I still feel like I've seen so much of and we need to discuss, and how to be a good community member. I think that, I would say for my generation and lower, I would say it's different for the Gen Zers. I'm a millennial. But I'm like, there's been such an adaptation of individualism, and that is not of us. That
Mm-hmm.
is not a
Mm-hmm.
part of our culture. We're a very communal culture.
Right.
But this sense of individuality that's being supported with different therapy talk, whether that's like, my boundaries. And I'm like, yes, your boundaries, but there is a such thing as isolation and avoidance, and not showing up and being a good community member, and not showing up and being a good friend. So how does that look like? I was like, how do I break this down? How can you be a good friend? How can
Mm-hmm.
you have a welcoming energy in person? How many times have you, gone into a room full of Black women and you're greeted with the up and down stare, but not a smile? That always
Mm-hmm.
breaks my heart, right?
It
Like
happened to me
that.
last week. I went somewhere and that happened. I was like,
Really?
Until I saw a couple people that I knew. Of course, they gave me different energy, but everybody else
Right.
was like, I complimented somebody and she's like, yeah.
See, and that's so big. And you know why that's so we may not think of it as damaging as it is, but it's super damaging because to be seen is so healing for us because we're not seen out in the world. And when we are seen in the world, it could be in we're perceived as a threat, we're perceived as less than. So when we're coming in the presence of each other and we're not, you know, celebrated, we're not even honored, or we're judged or sizing up. It's so damaging and hurtful because what it solidifies is thought wise is, well, where can I go where I can feel comfortable and loved upon? If
Mhm.
not here, then where I'm supposed to be feeling, this warmth amongst my own people. If not here, then
Mhm.
where will I? And it can further seed this sense of isolation and doom and gloom of being Black in the world. So that chapter, I really wanted to address the healing that needs to be done in our community, how we can break down how to be a good community member, how to
Mhm.
be a good friend, how to show up, because the basics are lacking nowadays. The
Right.
basics are lacking, especially for some of these younger generations who don't know how, some of the social cues of like how to show up for each other. Everyone's like, no one does barbecues anymore. Well, that's because we can't rely on auntie and uncle. It's our
Right.
generation's time to
Right.
create some of those traditions in order to have and sustain a sense of community.
Yes, yeah, I had to bring that up. Like I said, this is a collective, and even
Right?
though it's a virtual collective, we carry the things that we learn in this space out into the real world, and
Mhm.
those are just things that are really important. Now, believe it or not, we are almost out of
Almost
time. We're
time.
getting close, so that those we talked a little bit. That we covered maybe one, two, three, four, about
Yes.
four of the 10 chapters that are actually in
Mm.
this book. But before we finish, first of all, I'm going to give you this question, and then I just want to talk to you now more about your actual work. And for those of
Yeah.
you who stick to the end, only a few more minutes. Jasmine's going to do an exercise, a breathing exercise with us. So those of you who are sticking around, got a few more minutes, get some good stuff. So this question is, as an aspiring breathwork
Mm.
practitioner, I'm wondering, what is your experience as a woman of color in wellness, where we're still working to be seen in spaces that are dominated by our counterparts?
Mm. Um, for me, I decided a long time ago I didn't care if they saw. I just decided a long time ago who my work was going to be for, because what tends to happen, especially when you are, you rise to ranks in certain work and you get opportunities, is that there's an expectation to broaden, like women of color, what have you. My biggest thing was, even if I said women of color, I'm not going to be attracting, many Asian or Hispanic women to my work. It's going to be Black women who show up. And so, why can't I, in seeing us, say that it's Black girls breathing? It is created with the intention to serve Black women, right? And I just, yeah, I feel like, I guess I'm just at a place in my career, and I think I always have been, where I've just stopped caring about this sense of diversity, in the sense when I need them to see me. Like, I don't care if they see me. I really don't. It is very the same kind of dynamics you experience in other industries you experience in wellness. And here's what I'll also say, that there are some well-known Black women in wellness who have not been supportive of my work. One, who have done very shisty things, right? Like, well, no, I'm not going to name drop, but so that's disheartening as well. But I just attribute that to the nature of there being a few in a space, that when there's one person who may be doing well beyond what you expected, and they've been true to themselves and who they serve, that there may be that energy of, like, again, that who do you think you are and where did she come from, and, blah, blah, blah. And so I think you experience in all industries, and it really, um, being true to the why of why you're doing this is going to be critical, because you're going to get hit. regardless.
Right. I love that you said that because I have heard something similar with Brown Girl Collective. And yes, brown
Mm,
because our skin is brown.
mm-hmm,
Black, we are black girls, black women, but
mm-hmm,
we are,
mm-hmm,
our skin is brown. So that's why Brown
mm-hmm,
versus Black Girl Collective. For those who might wonder. But yes,
mm-hmm,
I've gotten that question as well. Like,
mm-hmm,
uh, because there are so many spaces that are majority spaces.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's like we need spaces that are for us and that are safe and that we can really be honored and featured and
Mm-hmm,
not be a
mm-hmm,
one off or not be
mm-hmm,
a token or once or twice a year. We
mm-hmm,
need to be have these spaces that we can be
mm-hmm,
honored and celebrated because while there are a lot of things that are universal that if that apply to men, women, those who don't identify as either, there are
mm-hmm.
those things, but then there are things that are very specific to being a black woman.
Yes, yes. Yes, and our trauma shows up different. I could go on and on about this. I think Sherilyn was the one who asked this question, but even how the trauma shows up in our body, what I've learned in doing this work, and even how certain breath work techniques can show up for us, right? Like that's been a learning. We have such unique trauma, societal, individual, generational, right? It's kind of compounded. So yeah, it's definitely a more unique experience for us.
Mhm. Well, speaking of the work,
Yeah.
Black Girls Breathing. You have a lot of
Mhm.
things going on with Black Girls Breathing. And for those who are
Yes.
watching, you can see all the social and the website and stuff. If y'all
Yeah.
watch or if it's your first time, y'all can see it scrolling. So you know where to go to get more
Yeah.
information. But you actually founded Black Girls Breathing in 2018. So
Right.
yeah,
Late 2018. Right. It was
2018.
conceived October 2018
Okay.
in my group breathwork training. So when I was getting my facilitation training to do groups, I conceived of it, and then we had our first session January 2019. And so I've been doing this work. I mean, it's evolved. We used to have virtual breathwork classes
Mhm.
through Zoom. And then that shifted to having an online platform, our Sunday Bomb platform, which has, we have breathwork sessions and recorded breathwork videos, audio meditations, expanded content. So the work lives on with ways for Black women to practice consistently on that platform. I did just launch a training, a breathwork training. We're going to have our first one this I'm saying fall. We will have a fall one.
Right.
Fingers I'm like, depends on how tired I am. we're planning to have a fall one. But we have a spring training. I'm really excited about that. It's been something that has honestly, a lot of this work has been pushed by God. I keep telling people that. I'm like, you have no idea that I am such a good worker and I am really good, at the industry that I was in before all this in marketing. Was really great at it. I would love a job. I asked God for, I'm like, God, I can always work, I don't I
Mhm.
don't have to. But this is something that was given to me. This was something that
Right.
was given to me. So I really want to, it's not something I necessarily saw getting as big as it did, especially a book. Wow, that's amazing. But doing a training now to pass on all the knowledge I've learned because probably use 10% of what I learned in my training for actual practice with this
Mm.
demographic. We just got to think though, right? Like
Right.
the teachers never engaged with this demographic in that way. So the type of trauma that you're really navigating, they didn't have the skill set for, and you can't really blame them because of
Right.
who their clientele is, right? So
Right.
I'm passing on all that I've learned in practice, doing this work with thousands of Black women in a training now that I'm really excited. It's backed by data we've collected, and just all my experience. And so to open the door for new facilitators in this space, we do need that diversity. And then yeah, now there's a book here. So I know, right? Well, I know.
Don't be
Listen,
tired for
prayer,
the
prayer. We will renew my strength. No, I'm really excited about the training, and we've learned so much. We've got so much more demand than we didn't plan for it. We could only take 20 for this spring, but had over 200 applicants.
Wow.
Yeah, and interviewed 65 and then took around 20, but definitely are reworking the program to take more capacity for the fall, as we see that there's a demand for it. So I'm excited about that. I'm really hopeful for the book. My intention was that the book is a resource, and
Yes.
all that I've learned is just practical, and people can pick it up, find an exercise, take 30 seconds and do something and feel different, and do
Mhm.
that over and over and over and over until that practice becomes a habit, and that habit shifts different patterns, and where we're at a place where we're not living in the lens of our trauma. We're deciding to operate in all the ways that we can in our individual freedom, even though we may not experience all of the external freedom out in the world. We still have a decision to cultivate that inner freedom. That's how our ancestors were able to make it to this moment. It is
Right.
our power and our strength. So as long as we can cultivate that, we will be okay. So
Yes.
yeah.
And the last chapter is called Thriving and Free. So yeah,
Thriving
that's
and
so
free, thriving and free.
thriving
Yeah,
and free, not just
yeah,
surviving
yeah,
and
thriving.
bound up.
I know.
Thriving and free. So
Yes.
I love this so much. Thanks
Thank you for
again to your
having
mama.
me. No,
Thank you
I know.
again for making sure that I knew about you, even though I already did. But thank her.
And that was such an affirmation too, Marcie, to be seen by you in this space, the literary space, with welcome arms. Like, I so appreciate that. It meant so much to me to be seen in this space. So thank you.
Oh, you are so welcome. Thank you. Thank you for all you're doing. And I'm going to give a last plug about the book. Everybody,
Yes.
please get
Go
Black
get the
Girl.
book.
Please
It's
get it
available everywhere, and go get it in
everywhere,
stores. I'm
everywhere,
going to preach this. It
everywhere.
is such a blessing, and also understand that it was, the work that my Black editor, put in to ensure that this got on a shelf space, you all. So it's in Barnes and Nobles and Books a Million across the country. I've signed many copies at the Buckhead in Atlanta, Perimeter in Cumberland. I signed 5 copies at Cumberland. There's only 2 left now. I signed them at the beginning of this week. So they go fast when you sign them, but I'm going to keep doing that as long as it's on shelf.
All
And I'm
right.
be at Houston tomorrow.
Okay. Okay. So you're going to Houston. I just wanted to share this. There is a Brown Girl Collective bookstore, which is attached
Yay.
to Bookshop. So if you just go to www.browngirlcollectivebookstore.com, this book is listed there as well. So that's another option. And it helps to support the work that I'm doing here. So I can
Yes. Yes.
bring Jasmine back and other people, other Black women writers and practitioners who are doing all these wonderful things in support of us and our community, because that community has always been important, but it's even more so right now that we are
Yes.
together and we support each other, and that we're learning the tools that we, need to have so that we can stay stay as calm as
Right.
possible in the midst of a
Yes.
lot of chaos that's happening around us. So it's
Yes.
just so, so, so important. So I am going to give you a moment. I think we have one more
Yeah.
comment, and then I'm going to let you go ahead and give us a little something. Someone saying, yes, it is. Yes,
Yes, it is.
it's critical right now. Sherilyn says she's got her copy. So yeah,
Yay. All
yes.
right, you all.
All right.
Let's just get
I'm
into a
going
little
to off
breathing.
screen and let you do
Okay.
it.
Okay. Let's go ahead and settle into our chairs or whatever service is supporting us. Go ahead and close your eyes. We're going to be doing a bit of the oceanic breath to close us out, just a couple of rounds. It should help us to feel more at ease and relaxed, to slip into an easeful evening if you're going to bed or if you're winding down on the West Coast. Your mouth is going to be wide open for increased airflow. You're going to be inhaling through your mouth and exhaling out of the mouth. Inhale through the mouth, exhale out of the mouth. Uninterrupted, we're going to breathe and connect that inhale to the exhale, and your sound of your inhale and exhale should be just like the name of this pattern, oceanic. So just like the waves coming into shore and then leaving out to sea. Expand those lungs on the inhale and feel your lungs deflate and your ribs hug your stomach on that exhale. So inhaling, exhaling. Inhale, exhale. Uninterrupted. Let's do a few more rounds. Three more. And on that last exhale, eyes can still be closed. Just take in how your body feels. And keep in mind that ease and sense and groundedness you feel in your nervous system, you always can return back to by creating a few minutes in your day with the breath, with a pattern just like this. So I want to thank you to Brown Girl Collective for having me. Marcie, thank you so much. Thank you all for tuning in.
Thank you. And somebody put the wow, but I guess that was them breathing. They put the wow avatar, so that's funny because I'm like,
yes, just like that, just like that.
So thank you everyone for being here. Thank you, Jasmine. Of course we are in the same city, so I look forward to being able to connect with you. And I wasn't kidding about my sorors. And
I would love to come.
Yeah, that we can do something because this type of work is just important for all of us. So thank you. I'm gonna don't hang up yet, but I'm gonna let you go and get some water or whatever the case. Give me like 1 minute and I'll be back with you. But I want to say good night to everyone else. So thanks again, Jasmine. I appreciate you. Bye-bye. All right. So that was great. I always love it when I have someone who can come and just give us skills to help us live well. That's what the show is called. So having Jasmine here was definitely a blessing. Thanks again to her family and everyone who has been a part of this journey for her and all of those good things. So yes. Oh, thank you. Yes, you're so welcome. And got some fists and all that kind of stuff, getting those breaths in. And yes, thank you, ladies. This was amazing. Yes, it was. So thank you all for being here. I really do appreciate you and being a part of this community. Please share this out because more people need to see this. More people need to get this information. And not just this, but all of the different things that we talk about here in this space. So if you're not already following Brown Girl Collective on YouTube, that's a good place. You can go and catch all the over 200 some episodes that I've done, not just this type of conversations, but also just Black women writers of fiction as well. So please go there and do that. So last thing for tonight, and I'm gonna let you all go. Next week we're actually going to be going in a different direction, but this is also an important conversation. We're going to be talking about dark laboratory on Columbus, the Caribbean, and the origins of the climate crisis. Now that might be like climate crisis, but how many of you all know that we are definitely dealing with a climate crisis? Because here in Atlanta and in my mother's part of Southern Georgia and New Orleans and other places, there's a lot of snow recently. So we know that there's things going on in our climate. But we're going to have this conversation next week to just talk about that and the climate crisis and how it ties to the Caribbean and just other things from, a diasporic view. So look forward to that next week. And I look forward to seeing you all then. And yes, thank you, Christina. I might be saying it wrong, so forgive me. Yes, thank you for sharing and knowing that it was shared with you. Deshelle, thank you. Thank you. So yes, I'm paying it forward. Thank you. Please do. And then, yes, we need to know about this too. The climate impacts our physical and mental health. Absolutely. So sometimes, even though it might not seem like it makes sense off the top, it makes sense. So thank you for seeing that, and thank you for being a part of this community. I look forward to seeing you again next week. And until then, please take good care of yourselves and continue to live well. See you soon.